Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Are we all awake? Got enough caffeine? All right, so I want to talk about an effort that's been going on the last year or so, and just to make sure you get credit, this is the software security or software framework team, so feel free anytime in the meeting to buttonhole any of us if you have questions about the new framework or software security in general. So we have a great team here. It's definitely a team effort. Okay, so the basic challenge is that your organizations are writing software. And I know that's really annoying. But they are. And it doesn't matter whether they're writing it themselves or, as we heard before, they're using AI to write the software. You're writing software, and the question is, what processes do you have in place to secure that software? Do you even know what software you've got? Do you even know what it's doing, what its level of security is? Do you know what software you don't have to pay attention to secure it? And so without the software processes in place, you're kind of flying blind and hoping that ad hoc within your organization, things are happening pretty well. You can have a totally secure environment, totally secure network. As soon as you put up a software service on the network, that's a gateway through all those firewalls to the inner, good, tasty, soft interior of your environment. So if your software isn't secure, all those other barriers you put up may not be that useful. So this is an important thing to think about. And you might have a variety of software. Maybe just a student or staff or postdoc is writing something for their own use. Maybe no big. Or maybe they're writing for their own use and sharing it around with your organization, or distributing it to a wider community, or even more serious, deploying it on the internet as a service, data, computing, whatever, control. Or maybe you're one of these people that's using computers to control a device, anything from a simple robot arm or experiment to a telescope, cyber-physical systems. So for all these different types of software, do you understand what the threats are, what the risks are, and what you should be doing to take care of them? And what should your posture as an organization be to help your scientists and your engineers know what to do in these circumstances? That's the big problem we're trying to answer. So do you have the people, the resources, processes in place to know what to do with this software you're developing? Because it's going to be written no matter what. So, as we've learned from the Trusted CI framework, you want to have a security plan in place. Something that'll help you figure out what you should do, how to resource it, who's supposed to do it. And this is a unique problem space, so what you really need is a software security plan. And we want to try to do it in the most painless, effective way as possible that doesn't turn things on its head. So, if you're going to try to put together a framework that's going to help you develop a software security plan, it's got to be appropriate for science. So it's got to focus on the needs of the science community and within the constraints of funding and staffing of your organization. You've heard this before with a software security plan. With a framework, you're going to hear the same themes over again. Just stick the word software in the title. And it has to be appropriate for your organization, consistent with your mission. It's got to make sure you can do your mission and not interfere with that mission. Really important, and one of the lessons that we learned from the Trusted CI framework is it needs to be prescriptive. How do you go from having no software plan in place, no software processes in place, to having that? How do you involve the leadership, assign responsibilities, get resources, get a budget, select controls? How do you go from zero to software hero there? This is one of the biggest challenges because there are lots of resources out there that will tell you things to do, but how do you implement those? How do you get those in place? And that's what the framework is supposed to do, to get you in the place where you've developed a software security plan that you can then execute. And we want it to be based on minimum standards. So you need to get a competent security program, and this is going to cause you to consider a lot of new things you hadn't done before. And it has to be incremental. If you have to do this big, huge thing all at once, it may be so big that you just kind of back away from it. So we want to think about how can you incrementally adopt this so you can actually get something in place in a practical way, again, without derailing the science mission of your organization. So how do we get to this particular point where we're doing this activity? Well, three things happen. The first is, oh, hey, there's this framework. And when Scott was talking, a lot of people raised their hand because they knew what the framework was. He says, oh, you're probably tired of hearing about it. Okay, sorry, you're going to hear about frameworks some more. So this has been a great success. This has been something that's gone on for a decade now and is built up to some pretty serious momentum here. Meanwhile, over the last decade, we've been doing a lot of stuff with software security or software assurance. We've been doing training and teaching. Some of you may have seen or heard about or attended our tutorials that we do at places like Internet 2, at past security summits, at supercomputing, and we go out to organizations. We've engaged with several organizations doing in-depth vulnerability assessment of your code, trying to figure out where the weaknesses are in it and what we can do to make that code more robust. A whole group of us across the whole project in 2021 did what we were calling our annual challenges on software assurance. We interviewed several organizations about their posture. We updated and wrote a new version of the software engineering guide. Learned a lot about that. And so we have a lot of contacts out with you folks in software security. So we've gotten kind of an understanding and seen a pretty wide variety of postures on software security. Then we had this whole renewal process. You know, if you heard last year, we've got a 5-year new run on the activities we're doing as Trusted CI. And as we were thinking, I love grant renewals on interesting projects because it's a chance to rethink what you were doing, try to visit what worked, what didn't work, what do I want to accomplish that I haven't done yet? And so that process gave us to the point where we really need to try something more systematic to the science community for software development processes. So these three things came together and said, let's develop a software security, or just what we call our software framework. So if you've been looking around, paying attention to software security, you know there's some really good programs out there. OWASP has SAM, their Software Assurance Maturity Model, which has a lot of good stuff in it. Microsoft has their Security Development Lifecycle, which is a nice set of phrases on how to frame your software development process. NIST SP 800-218 is a really nice set of processes and controls that one can do to have a secure development environment. The industry likes the BSIM model, which is building security in, which is basically, I'll do whatever the other people in my sector are doing, because that must be good security. Okay, I'm a little cynical of that one. So if you could follow what any one of, I'll say the top three, because the fourth one annoys me, but if you could follow what any of the top three do and just do all those things, you'd be in good shape. There's kind of some problems here. How do you get to the point where you can get those things in place? So you have to establish buy-in for leadership, because you'll never get something happening across your organization without it being leadership directed. Bottom up gives you very uneven, spotty, and inconsistent results. Who will lead this effort within the organization to coordinate it? So you do have some kind of organized effort. Who will implement various parts of this program? Who will be responsible for the things that you think your organization should do for software security? How will you get the resources for doing it? Can I slice off? Can I get new people? Can I slice off time from various other people so they have a commitment to do these activities? Can we commit time from the people doing the programming to do these activities? And what software does it apply to and at what levels? The software grad students writing on their own laptop and the software that's controlling the movement of some large device need quite different sets of controls. And how will you provide the guidance for doing that? So establishing all of this in a way that doesn't make you too crazy, that takes you from zero to having a reasonable program, that's the goal of the software framework here. Now, we got a lot to do, and we're trying to catch up with the existing software framework that's been going on for a decade. So, I'm always telling my students in the research world, we have so many problems to do, borrow or steal whenever possible. There's so many new things to reinvent, don't reinvent the ones you don't need to reinvent. So, one of the guiding principles that I have promoted to the team is, if there's something that the Trusted CI framework is doing that will work for us, just do it that way. Now, there's going to be many new things we have to do, and as we've had detailed discussions about the various aspects of it, there's really specific software security aspects. But don't reinvent everything just for the sake of reinventing it. Use stuff as you can. So these are the familiar pillars of the software, of the Trusted CI framework. And one of the first things we did was have a discussion saying, do these pillars match the mission of software security? And we had a really interesting discussion. Scott and Craig were in on that discussion here, and we learned a ton about the framework, and they learned a ton about software security. And the short answer was yes. So the pillars were basically, so far, a good approach. So I'm going to go through them, not in great detail, because that's really, that's probably a little too much, but just to give you an idea. So if you've done the Trusted CI framework, this is going to look really familiar. Anybody ever done the silly middle school game with fortune cookies, where you open the fortune cookie and you add in the sheets, between the sheets? So just stick the word security at the end of every fortune here. Okay, that's probably not a great analogy, but it's funny. So, yes, tailoring the software program to your organization's mission, identifying and getting buy-in from your stakeholders and figuring out what your obligations are. Those are all basic. Identifying your software assets. You know all the software that's being developed in your organization. And how do you figure out all the software? And this is different than trying to figure out all your IT assets. Trying to figure out all the software and what you should pay attention to or not. I'll tell you in a minute, this is one of the musts that we've had a long discussion about, and I think we've gotten a good handle on that. And then, how do you classify those software assets? Because classification means, what level of process controls do I need to apply to that asset? And you got some kind of rough idea of, well, a grad student or postdoc doing a little data analysis, writing their own little data analysis program in Python on their laptop is different from something you deploy in the internet with a wide variety of usage data and sitting on your central servers. So we need some way of coming up with a basic way of classifying it and then deciding what controls go along with that. You've got to get leadership involved early on here, because if you're going to promote it and promulgate it through your organization, you need to get leadership. You got to figure out what's your risk model here. What is it you can accept, and what do you have to do to reach that level of risk exception? Is there a software security lead? If you're in a large organization, that might be somebody that works directly for the CISO. In a science organization, rarely you're going to carve off a whole separate software security lead person, and so you're going to have to figure out where that responsibility lies. You're going to have to figure out how to include it in all your entities within your organization. Policies, keeping these things up to date and refining them. These are all follow similar to the existing Trusted CI framework. How do you make sure you have resources to do this? And so you have to pick things that you have the resources to do. You have to decide what you want to do and make sure you have enough resources to do it. Probably most of you who visit an activity like this are going to be uncomfortable because it's going to take more time than just writing code and hoping it doesn't cause your organization to collapse. and end up on the front page in the New York Times or CNN. So establishing a budget for it, allocating personnel or what part of people have to do this. This is all part of the processes. And figuring out what external resources, what training, what auditing. You know, for example, Trusted CI, we've come in and done these in-depth vulnerability assessments of software. That's an example of an external resource that you may need or want to make use of. And then at the end of all this, you're going to try to pick some controls. Maybe it'll be based on one of those things I talked about earlier on, like Microsoft SDL or OWASM or 800.218 or one of those things like that. But picking these controls and then customizing them for your organization so you can get something done and be more comfortable about the software security posture of your organization. It sounds like a lot, it sounds like intimidating, but the goal is to walk you through it step by step. So just to the point where you come to the natural conclusions of what your organization needs and how to get to those needs, how to get those needs addressed. Okay, so what's been going on? That's the intimidating. Oh my God, do I have to really do all that? Don't I have enough to do already? I'm sorry. We had this discussion as we were developing the renewal proposal, and one of the things came up was, why don't we produce a software framework so organizations have some guidance? We can be in a position to help you get to the point of understanding what your software security posture should be. Talked about how these initial discussions, Craig and Scott played a big role on that. And I said, we went through the musts and said, do these make sense? And that was that short answer, yes. Then we started, a little less than a year ago, having serious discussions. We put a team together. We started talking, trying to build up some shared experiences, trying to make sure we all were on the same page of what we were trying to accomplish. We try to share what our experiences are and thought what the problems we were trying to solve were, set expectations and goals, and then went pretty quickly into review of the musts. This is basically going through again, making sure the whole team agreed that the current framework of musts was a good template, customized and adapted, but a good template for what we needed. And we went through that. And the first product we produced was last March. There is a document now, which is the Trusted CI Software Framework Prototype. It has all the musts cast specifically for the software development, secure software development process, along with descriptive text that goes along, a couple of paragraphs of descriptive text for each one. That document is here. You can download the PDF of this talk, so that's just a long URL that you're not going to write down, obviously. So that document is there for you to review to get an idea of what's going on. That was the first product we produced. Then we said, let's move on to the implementation guide. So the SOFIG, the Software Framework Implementation Guide. This is the chapters that tell you how you're going to accomplish each one of these musts. And we had a discussion, and the conclusion was, don't start with the first two, because they're pretty generic, and it's going to sound a lot like the existing framework. Let's start with one that have very specific software needs, and to see if we can understand that and make very specific progress on advice for establishing a software security program. So we started with that software assets, and that generated a very interesting discussions, and we then moved into, finished that, and moved into software assets classification, because assets classifications, very tightly related activity. So we went through the chapters, we went through the existing FIG to understand what they thought the chapter was. We used that as a jumping off point, and then we wrote the first chapter for must 3. And this is available, so this came out in September, so that's just last month. And whoops, I'll show you, I'll give you a link so you can actually review that as a prototype chapter and give us feedback. So, and I'll talk about feedback, it's a very important thing. So, that's up till today. So, finished, we've got the must design for software. We've got one chapter done, another one pretty far along. First, you're the first public group to hear about this effort. So this is now our chance to start socializing this activity, start involving you, getting feedback. We want to hear your ideas, thoughts, fears, encouragement. Hopefully no rotten tomatoes or anything like that. So on our end, we're working through the must chapter by chapter, building up the SOFIG. So we're going to continue to make progress as a group. We're trying to finish our second chapter, which is must 4, and then we're going to evaluate what we've done and figure out how to distribute that activity into our group more widely and make faster progress. This is also the moment, as we publicize it, we want to start getting more external feedback. And so one of our tasks for the coming months is recruit an advisory committee. Sean in his talk mentioned that we want to be reaching out amongst some major facilities and software experts to try to get feedback on that to help us. We want somebody to bounce our ideas off of, look at what we're doing, and help us come to something that's more useful for the community. We will probably in about a year from now, plus or minus, identify a first brave cohort who wants to try to develop a software framework for their organization and pick up probably a couple organizations as the very first group. So keep that in mind if you think you're an organization that's ready to take on that activity. So that was the first document on the left that we produced. This is the first page of the chapter we produced for must 3 for software assets. Both of these are available for you to download. Take a look at them. Feel free to send feedback, send ideas, send thoughts. And I don't know, I guess we haven't talked about this as a group, but my guess is we'll probably publish the finished SOFIG FIG chapters as they come along. So we're going to, I always believe in transparency, and I also believe in community feedback. So we're going to probably put this stuff up to the public to review. We'll figure out some way of providing a notification structure for that. The idea of just releasing them one at a time just occurred to me. So obviously we have any mechanisms for doing that, but we're going to be looking for your feedback. So you can review the framework and SOFIG chapter that we have. You can talk to us, make suggestions, come to us with your challenges. Talk to us about the content and the process and what your needs are. So as we want to incorporate, because if we're not solving your problems and helping you get on a better posture for software security, then the activity isn't going to make a difference. So don't need to see that. At that point, I'm happy to take questions, comments, feedback from you folks.
Hi. I'm interested to ask if there's any relationship between this new framework and the software assurance guide that Trusted CI published in 2021.
Oh, absolutely. So we as a larger group wrote this software engineering guide. Basically, as you try to create a software security program in your organization, you're going to need resources. You need reference material. And what's really interesting is because we've been engaging with you over the last decade with Trusted CI and whatever its previous names were, we've developed a lot of resources out there. One of them is the Secure Software Engineering Guide, which is also due for an update. The other is we have all these online software security training materials that have come, Lisa Hyman and I have been working on. You've seen some of this if you've been to any of our training activities. So those are going to be resources to help you accomplish the things you want to do when you put together a software security program. So we've done the bottom level stuff, now we're doing top down, and when they're going to merge in the middle and hopefully be complementary. So as you go through and try to satisfy some of these musts, these will be existing resources that are available to you right now for that. There'll be other resources we need to develop as we go along, but we have these ready-made resources to help you out there. Good prompt, thank you.
Just curious, I don't think I heard you say it right, but software bill of material, SBOM, have you thought about how that might fit into the...
Well, so SBOM, software bill of materials, so they're actually addressing somewhat different problems because the assets are what software projects, software development projects do you have in your organization? Not what libraries are those programs using, but what software development projects do you have in your organization, and what are the characteristics of those programs that describe their security needs? Now, if you're developing a software project, you want to know all the components that are going into your software project. So if your organization, any organization that's trying to deal with software security has to address the notion of what vulnerabilities am I inheriting from my software dependencies. And so software dependency tools, SBOMs play a part in that. But the assets is a higher level problem of, do I know all the teams that are developing software across my organization? So that's a different level.
So applicable, but not necessarily in the must that I was initially thinking.
Yeah, it's not directly in the must. It's definitely something you're going to do when you start doing your software processes and figure out what, for example, tools you need to run as part of your software development lifecycle. You're going to definitely want to be using tools and dealing with SBOMs.
Right, great, thank you.
Hey, I do have a quick question. So I am a research software engineer working currently at the NCSA in UIUC. So I want to understand this framework, the relation between this framework and the implementation guidance, like for example, for like each of the research software engineer. Like this looks like very from the organizational perspective, right? You know, people look from the, like for example, school IT. They want to know what each of the software assets, like for example. But when we work as a research software, we deal with more, I would say like a concrete example. Each of the project is super different. And what we want to, when we try to promote this kind of secure practice, we want to convince the PIs, who is normally the researchers, from another universities, from another department. So I want to know, like for this kind of like framework, like what part of the framework that would be very useful for like software engineer like us to take like more concrete steps?
Well, so that's a really good question. So the goal is, how do you get your organization prepared so they have a software program that they can tell each software development team with the organization what they should be doing? And you know, as you said, each software project has its own different characteristics, but those projects probably have enough commonalities that I want to come up with maybe 3 or 4 software categories of things that need really massive security processes because they're controlling large vehicles, things that I'm deploying on the web, things that we're developing internally, and things that don't need much because they're just local. And that will provide the guidance to you as a software developer, as a software engineer within your organization. So the organization has to know what to tell each software development project within the organization. And so this is to set up that set of guidance and provide you the resources and the time so you can do the things you need to do to secure your software. And then the implementation guide will then help you find the resources to do what you need to do as well.
Thank you.
Thank you all.